I don't tell this story at parties anymore because it always starts the same way. People laugh. They make a joke about horror movies. And then I get to the part where my mouth goes dry and my hands won't stop moving. When I was 19, my friends and I had a hobby we pretended was exploration, even though it was mostly trespassing in places that should have been left alone. We were suburban kids with too much time and not enough sense, and abandoned buildings were the closest thing to an adventure we could afford. There were 4 of us that summer. Me, Nolan, Casey, and Drew. Nolan was the one with the car and the confidence. Casey brought the camera and acted like every crumbling hallway was a film set. Drew was quiet until he got nervous, and then he couldn't stop talking. I was the one with the flashlight. I had this stupidly expensive torch I'd saved up for, like owning a powerful light somehow made me prepared for whatever was waiting in the dark. The place we picked that night wasn't a school or a hospital, like the usual urban legends. It was an old water treatment facility, about 25 minutes from where we lived, tucked behind a line of trees and a broken chain-link fence. Online, it looked boring. A few concrete buildings, some rusted tanks, a couple of low structures with flat roofs. But people posted photos of tunnels, ladders, rooms that disappeared into shadow. That was enough. We parked on a side street and walked in with the kind of casual swagger only teenagers can fake. The fence had been bent back, like someone had peeled it open with their hands. Casey joked that we'd been invited. Drew said, "Don't say that," and Nolan laughed and walked through anyway. Inside, everything smelled like wet metal and old algae, even though the place had been dry for years. My light cut a clean white beam across concrete walls, chipped paint, and pipes that ran like veins along the ceiling. The quiet was so complete it felt staged. No insects, no birds, just our shoes on the floor and the occasional drip from somewhere we couldn't see. We found a stairwell leading down and followed it, single file, the way you do without thinking when the hallway narrows and your instincts start trying to take control. The lower level opened into a wide room with tanks like giant bathtubs, empty and stained dark around the rims. There were words spray-painted everywhere, names, symbols, the usual mess. But one thing stood out because it didn't match the rest. On the far wall, in a space where the concrete was still mostly clean, there was a circle drawn in white. It wasn't paint. It looked like chalk, thick and fresh, like someone had made it hours ago. Around the circle were small marks, short lines at weird angles, as if someone had tried to write a language and then given up halfway. Casey lifted the camera. Nolan said, "Don't," as a joke, but his voice tightened at the end. Drew asked if it was some kind of prank. I didn't answer, because my flashlight beam caught something else. A small pile in the center of the circle. Little objects, rounded and reflective. Marbles. Or stones polished smooth. I remember thinking how stupidly out of place they were. This was a facility built for machines and water and chemical smell. And there in the middle of an empty underground room, someone had arranged children's toys like a ritual. Nolan, trying to force the vibe back into something he could control, stepped closer. His shoe hovered at the edge of the chalk line like he was about to cross it just to prove he could. Casey whispered, "Don't mess it up," because he was thinking about the shot. Drew said, "Seriously, don't," because he was thinking about anything but the shot. And then Nolan's backpack strap slid off his shoulder. It was a little thing, a harmless, everyday movement. He reached to catch it, and his hand closed around nothing but air. He looked at us like we'd pulled a prank. "Okay, which one of you?" Casey lifted both hands, the camera still in one. Drew shook his head too fast. I said, "Dude, it's on you," and swept my light across the floor. The backpack wasn't there. There are only a few ways to lose something in a room with 4 people and no furniture. Either you dropped it and didn't notice, or someone took it, or it was never real to begin with. Nolan's face went through all 3 possibilities in the span of a second. He started laughing, but it was the wrong kind of laugh, the one people use when their body wants to panic, but their pride won't let them. He turned in a circle, scanning. Very funny. Put it back. We all moved at once, lights and eyes, searching corners, under the tanks, around the pipes. The floor was bare. There was nowhere it could have gone without one of us seeing. And that's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was my own breathing. Then it sharpened into something else. A thin, steady sound, like air escaping a valve. A hiss. Not loud enough to tell you where it. I tried to explain it away for weeks. I told myself that what happened at the facility was just kids being stupid, running into other kids who wanted to scare us. I told myself the chalk was a coincidence, the marbles were a prank. The voice was someone who enjoyed the power of being unseen. But the problem with telling yourself a story is that your body doesn't always believe it. For a long time after I left that last house, I couldn't sleep unless every door was locked twice, and every room was checked in a specific order. If I messed up the order, I had to start over. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, waiting for a sound that might never come, and hating myself for how relieved I'd feel when morning finally showed up. I moved into an apartment building after that. Neighbors on every side, people above me, people below me. I figured I'd be safer if I was surrounded. I figured whoever it was wouldn't risk being seen. For a while, it worked. The noises of other people's lives filled in the gaps where fear likes to grow. Then one night, I came home late and found something outside my door. Not a note. Not a threat. Just 3 marbles sitting in a neat little triangle on the welcome mat. Clear glass, perfectly clean, like they'd never been on the ground. Like they'd been placed there with care. My throat went tight so fast I started coughing. I stood there in the hallway, keys in my hand, and realized I didn't want to touch them. Not because I thought they were poisoned or dangerous, but because touching them felt like accepting something. Like shaking a hand you didn't want to meet. I got a paper towel from the lobby bathroom, scooped them up like they were insects, and dropped them in the trash outside. I watched them disappear under coffee cups and fast food wrappers, and I told myself that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 mornings later, the building's elevator was out of service, so I took the stairs. On the 2nd floor landing, someone had drawn a circle on the concrete step in thick white chalk. It wasn't big, it wasn't dramatic. It was almost casual, like a child doodling. Except the marks around it weren't casual. Short lines, angled strokes, the same strange half-language I'd seen years ago underground. I backed up so fast, I almost fell down the stairs. My hands went numb. I stood there with my heart pounding, staring at that circle like it was an open eye. And the worst part, the part that still makes my stomach turn, was the thought that followed. It wasn't, who would do this? It was, how long have they been close enough to do it whenever they want? I didn't report it. What would I even say? Someone drew a circle on the stairs? I cleaned it up with a wet rag and scrubbed until my fingers ached. But the chalk dust smeared into the pores of the concrete, leaving a faint ghost ring no matter how hard I tried. That night, I sat on my couch with every light on, telling myself I was done letting this control me. And then, just after midnight, I heard it. Soft, steady, and patient. A thin hiss, somewhere in the walls. Not loud enough for anyone else to notice, just loud enough for me.